regards to scheduling matters, just would like to report back to the discussion kind of the naming of David Tilden for a park. Didn't get back to us. How about now? Okay. I would like to get back to the idea of naming a portion of the park, and we suggested the park over here in Maple Dawson, portion of that. But whatever it is something we need for David until we want to see that drop, so if we could schedule that sometime, I really appreciate it.
And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, you are now serving as the RAC liaison for council?
I am, and the rec did suggest that, like, the tennis courts would ask for purchase.
Is there a recommendation ready, or you got another meeting coming up soon?
They recommended, we don't meet in July and August. We don't meet in July and August, but the Recreation Advisory Committee, I believe it was in April, recommended that a portion of the park be dedicated to David Gentile.
We can have that on the next agenda.
Thank you so much.
All right, we're moving on to reports from members of council. Mr. Newcomer.
I was the MC again of the recreation concert. It was a really great time last Wednesday, and it was great weather. It was a great band. It was wonderful, really wonderful. Also, as Stacy mentioned, and this is not usually something I guess we report on, but I think it was a really heinous act that somebody would shoot down a plane with 295 people in it. And I think we should all think about talking to our Congress people about that.
Mr. Garwood.
Thank you very much. I'll agree with you about the late flight. That is a heinous act, and it's reprehensible that something like that happened in this day and age. On to other things. Last Wednesday, I did go up to the Burlington County Freeholders budget adoption meeting. The freeholders actually voted in a tax decrease for Burlington County. And it sort of got me rejuvenated to get our own tax rates in check and start to follow their lead. So I'm using this as a rallying call for our next budget cycle. I think we all got to get our noodles together and find out more productive ways and more effective ways to do things. And, restructure if we need to or whatever we need to do. I think that it's pre-budget cycle, I know, but this is where they plant the seeds and water the seeds and watch them grow. So, go on. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Napolitano.
I don't have a lot to add, except I just picked up this book at the library, and it only smells like a book, so I'm very pleased to report that.
Just have one thing, or two things actually. The Shade Tree Committee has been meeting with volunteers. They've been pruning the trees, the new trees that have been planted, and the trees that are a couple of years old. So I just want to thank them publicly for the work they do, because they really make a difference in our town, and we're very appreciative of what they do. And then we also have an EDAC meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, I believe. I think it's here in the library. They have it on Tuesday. Yes, tomorrow night, Tuesday the 22nd. It'll be 7 o'clock, and I believe it's in the library. Okay. Moving on, any scheduling items that anybody needs to schedule? Upcoming meetings will be here in the Municipal Complex at 111 West 2nd Street in the Council Chambers on August 4th at 7:30 p.m. will be an official action, and August 18th, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. will be an official action meeting. Any agenda updates? Seeing none, we'll move on to adoption of consent agenda resolution. Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or nays? Okay. All right, now moving on to the workshop part of our meeting. Mr. Manager.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just two quick notes before I get into what's on the agenda. Glad Victoria brought up the library, and that's an excellent book. The library has been a humongous success since we opened up. packed each and every day, and it was amazing, because we got our TCO, and we quietly opened up the next day, or at least we thought it was quiet, and yet it was pretty full, and it's been full every day since then. Did have to give a directive for staff parking Washington and the Farway parking spaces to make sure that we have enough room for the residents to come in. But the library has been a huge success, and a lot of credit to the Joe and his staff for really cultivating that. The other thing, I know that we have Gina Ziegel's appointment to the Appearance Committee. If anybody hasn't taken the time, I think Greg has, to volunteer a week to water the plants up on the Flowers Main Street. I highly recommend it. It's a good bonding experience with my 10 and 11-year-olds, them taking turns, and I want to thank Mother Nature for 2 good days of rain last week to allow me to sleep in at least 2 of the days last week. But it really is, it's nice, people, when you're watering the plants or flowers even that early in the morning, you still get the positive feedback. People really, really like that Gina has put this together with all the volunteers that she has working, so kudos to her. Moving on to the rest of the workshop agenda, we do have outstanding appointments, and I think, Patty, if you can help me out in terms of what still needs to be decided upon by council.
I think we have 1 vacancy left on appearance, and there had been some discussion in the past about perhaps changing the recreation ordinance to add additional student members. So I
Yeah, I think it was to add,
So,
yeah, you could be sophomores too,
Right.
instead of just sophomores
But
and juniors, right?
I-
Or juniors and seniors.
I think,
Sophomores going into junior, junior
Going
going
to
into
seniors,
I was talking to Teresa, and there was some other advantages, and actually the rec talked about some of their advantages or criteria of those people, that they may not just be sports people. I think it would be good if we authored a paragraph and send it to Patty so that she could talk about what we need to do then, because we need to change the ordinance to do that. So I would be happy to drive that as well.
We've talked about this for a couple meetings, so if we can instruct you to make that ordinance happen for the next meeting, I think that would be.
okay, but I don't think that's what Greg's saying, right?
Well, I can put that in the instruction that, in other words, the idea would not just that they be named people, but they would be specific, like arts and sports and that kind of stuff. We need to really flesh out the language, and we can do that if the council's okay, and we can direct Patty to do it. Sure.
Well, you're suggesting that for the ordinance, we expand it to include the grade below that it currently is. And then why would we want to start to specify like so many from arts or so many? From my experience, we've had a great mix of kids, on there.
That was the one of the meeting that last meeting I attended, that was
That was it.
the discussion. That's why I'm saying it would better be kind of congealed
Yeah.
those folks a little bit, and then, but, I mean,
Is
it's
there a way
a
to make-
valuable exercise, because if you only have the sports folks in the town, and that doesn't represent all the youth in the town, you want to get a wide variety of those involved in recreation.
So you want to make it a regulation to have like one from the arts?
I wouldn't say it's a regulation, maybe
A guideline.
a guideline.
Yeah,
A guideline for one from the arts, one from the sports, you must have, or?
No, I think you're right, make it a guideline, it's like,
Right.
we just don't want it to be all sports.
Yeah, it's almost like a written job application. It's not a you must have this.
Right.
It's a suggested. But are we talking, just for clarification, we talking about general membership to the RAC or
No, just the
student
youth
membership?
members.
Youth liaison.
And the other portion of that, of course, is
Expand it.
juniors get so busy. That was the main beginning portion. They get so busy that sophomores and juniors would be a great mix. Sophomores are not that they're less busy, but if you had 4 of them, there would be more of them. We need the youth voice in our
I should say
recreation.
Teresa, is it just seniors now, or is it juniors?
It's always juniors, and it's usually, we ask for 1 male, 1 female, and it's always been sort of talked about, we've asked sports and arts, or I said, Greg and I spoke about, how about a young team who's very involved in community service?
Right.
Not exactly just sports or arts, but bring someone in who really has a lot to we figured if we could start with, 2 sophomores and 2 juniors, then they would always be there and help us with, getting it out on Facebook and getting different groups involved, getting 2 levels of grades involved.
Great. So Scott, do you have enough to move forward with
I
that?
think so.
Second?
One quick nuance, I know it's nitpicky, but would they be voting members of the committee or liaison members?
Whatever they are now, I think. It's just a matter
And
of,
that's always been a question, like,
Never really.
I don't think they vote either, but I just wanted
I think they're there just to give their opinions.
Your advisory.
to advise,
Yeah,
right, so they, because I know that was a big, I know we had a discussion on that a couple times, do they vote?
I was chair for
Yeah.
almost 3 years and on the committee for 6 years, and they were always advisory.
They were advisory along with the Board of Education.
Or they
But
could-
I did say that.
Right.
Right.
All right.
Is it a boy and girl sophomore?
That's
I
what
would think that would,
I think that would be the way to go.
Yeah.
I believe that's
So
the way the
2 of
committee
each
works.
grade?
So
Just,
yeah,
so just to be clear, they're old enough to be drafted to volunteer for stuff, but they can't vote.
exactly.
That's right. There's a lot of things they can't.
I don't really want to get into that.
Okay, so that takes care of, I guess, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And next, we go to, the third item on the list is the solar energy expert.
Could I just go reverse for a second, please?
Sure.
We talked about an appointment, and I was told by Neil, I was not able to attend the last appearance committee meeting because I had gone to a funeral. I was told by Neil that they discussed Richard Yeager, and they would like to put his name forward on behalf of the appearance committee. I also know Richard Yeager from the long-serving on that committee. It would be good to nominate him. If that would be good with the council, I'd like to suggest we go forward with him on the appearance committee.
Just for those that don't know, Mr. Yeager is, because I know the appearance committee has dynamics like we were just talking about with RAC.
He's a graphic designer, and he was one of the main people who put together what you see on Main Street in 1990.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
No problem. So moving on, we have the solar energy issue, and just to remind council and members of the public, last meeting we had Kathy Ward, the chairwoman of Sustainable Morristown, in give a, I guess, solar energy 101, and council at that time decided they wanted to go on for further education. And I did send today a list of 4 potential consultants for council to consider that have experience with municipal solar projects. I was able to get some more information on Major Consulting. Their name came up at the last meeting. They were involved with a large solar project for Brick Township, which was on a landfill. Of course, we're talking about solar on a brownfield site ourselves. Did provide council with a list, several pages long, of solar projects they've been involved with. And in talking to them today on the phone as a follow-up, apparently because they have offices all over the place. I think they have 3 different locations in New Jersey, they're in Connecticut, they're in Maryland. But they do have offices in Mount Laurel, and one of their solar engineers lives in Morristown, that they said if they were to work on the project, he would be one of the ones working. And I know based on conversations we've had recently with council that that's always an important benefit to have, is to have someone who lives in Morristown, has skin in the game, so to speak, and has an understanding of our township. So if there's any feedback council wants to provide or want more information, open for direction.
I believe that we ought to, as a council, figure out where we want to go. When the presentation was done last meeting, it was suggested that, for instance, we could have a PPA, or we could have a ownership in the solar project 1. 2, we want to figure out the suggested, and maybe Scott can help us, cost of the project, as well as the people that Scott has mentioned. I received information at 3 o'clock today. I don't know about anybody else's day, but my eyeball vision for solar. I'm also aware that Benoni has also done a group, plus the study that I gave you, all the council, rather, on July 16th last year mentions other solar folks. If we decide the scope of the project, cost of the project, or get some better idea of a handle on it, and then give direction, I think we'll manage that idea better. And maybe we should get some direction on that scope from our staff as well, as to what would be good for an ordinance to put forward. I have actually been recommending solar for 6 years. I certainly want us to move forward well in this. So I would suggest that we look at these other groups and also figure out what scope we want. The PPA and or the ownership are key to that. It's a whole different way to look at the study and more money spent with a
Rick,
professional.
I completely agree with you, and I think we need to have that scope, but I think that's the reason we will be engaging the firm to give us those answers. Scott is not, sorry for that, is not, well-versed or an expert in that. I think that's why we're looking at the different companies to give us that information. So
I think Scott is well versed in how you approach a study, is my point, and maybe I didn't make that so. Maybe I didn't make it clear.
Well, I am on the League Municipalities Subcommittee for solar. I have somewhat of an understanding of it. But no, I'm by no stretch of the imagination an expert or especially an engineer. And I think the difficulty in where council's at right now, and this is the decision I think council needs to make, is do we try to take those first few steps internally? And there are some people on Sustainable Morristown that have some knowledge. I have some knowledge, but my impression of what council was saying at the last meeting was to bring in the consultant now, because I agree with Greg. This first biggest decision is whether or not to do it. And the second biggest decision is whether or not you do the power purchase agreement or do it ourselves. And I've got my thoughts already on that, but I still would want to have access to a consultant who really has this subject well understood to guide that. Because I think when council makes that decision, they have to be as informed, well-informed as humanly possible. Because that is a huge decision. If we decide to go at our own, Kathy quoted a number of $9 million investment. That's obviously a lot of money to invest when you're not 100% sure it's the right decision.
I would agree, and exactly that is why I would say that we really wouldn't want to go forward with appointing a solar engineer who we have, at least I have very little information on tonight. I think we should review the solar engineers and come back, and maybe we can think a little more philosophically about that. In addition, we have a $60,000 to $80,000 study, and my friend Mr. Garwood has pointed out before to me often that we should look at the studies that we have before we go forward. So, I mean, this would be better things for us to do our homework on before we would even appoint an engineer as far as that goes with my.
Yeah, well, I think that, I agree, we have to look at the studies, but I think we should get a trained eye to look at the studies along with us. I went and did some homework for the past week too, and Mazer kept popping up, for large-scale projects. And I think that the scale of the project that we have on our horizon could be a significant project. And I think, to go in with a partner who really knows the business, knows what we need to look for, I see no harm in that. And it's, I would vote to move forward with appointing an expert to help us through this path, sooner rather than later. While we have a ton of great recommendations, we've analyzed it a lot. We've done a phenomenal amount of work. Kathy Ward's done a fantastic job. We have a lot of data that's right before us, and I think we really need to make the right decision moving forward. And I think, getting an expert on board with this would be the best way to go.
And while it would be an official vote, because he's not here, the mayor did call me today and ask me to pass along his, what would be his
suggest that since I have no information on Mazer, actually I would advise that since I have no information on Mazer going forward, I couldn't actually, I need somebody's paperwork in front of me. I need to know their information. I couldn't identify a person, and I think we really should go look at this. If you, as Scott said, if you're looking at the beginning of a $9 million project, right, I shouldn't be reading this today to figure it out. I should be able to study it.
No, and I think we were all, 2 weeks ago, we're going to do our homework and get some information. My concern is that, that we just do what councils have done in the past, just keep pushing it off and keep pushing it off and keep pushing it off. And I believe, before I was on council, we were looking at solar, and it took too long. The SREX kind of blew up and everything happened, and we weren't able to do it. We did have Kathy here last week saying that they wanted to move forward with this, that they thought it was a great idea, and they needed some expertise in helping guide us. So I don't think there's any harm in appointing, an alternate
We're
to
splitting the
help us out.
fingers.
Well, I just think we need to get it moving, because it seems like that was 2 weeks ago, then this is gonna be another 2 weeks, it's gonna be another month before we, I just like to see the thing move forward, because I'm a person of action. I wanna get things done, and I don't, town hall took me too long,
I
that
agree
took
with you.
this town too long to get done, and I don't wanna see this happen.
Absolutely, and we should have a good process.
Yeah, and so,
I think we need to be clear about what the role, we expect the role of this consultant to be. I don't believe the role of this consultant would be to actually design the solar farm. It's to serve as a consultant, get us to the decision of power, well, yes or no, then power purchase agreement or do it ourselves, and then I would assume at that point we'd go out for an RFP, and whoever would come in and build the farm would be the one who would design the farm. And so I guess really what it boils down to for council's decision, if you want to make a decision tonight, it's basically a combination of what Greg had said and what Phil had said, that, we want to take these next few steps and start making these decisions, reviewing studies, things of that nature. And as Phil said, do you want someone, a trained eye, to be with you to go along with that? And I think I don't think the decision tonight is to pick the engineer who's going to design the farm. It's going to be the consultant who's going to advise council and the staff on what steps to take, and how to look at the information that's going to be in front of us.
With respect to those remarks, when we decided that we were going to look into studies in regards to the building across the street, we limited it to a certain amount of funds. So how will we go forward in doing that tonight, knowing the amount of funds that we're going forward, or will we be advised on this later? How will we deal with that and responsibly, financial response?
I think we would do it in the same way we work with our other design and planning professionals, where we appoint them. It's like we have, Rick has an appointment, Scott has an appointment, but it doesn't necessarily give them carte blanche to do whatever work is done. And especially as we're talking about engineering with Alimo, Alimo still provides us with a proposal for each major project that they're going to engineer. So I think you would appoint the special engineer, whatever you want to call it, solar consultant, then they would consult us to make those first couple of steps. They would provide us with a proposal that says not to exceed X amount of dollars, and this is what we're going to get at. And I guess a similar situation that we've done recently is working with Princeton Hydro with the review of Strawbridge Lake, where we found the consultant first. We appointed the consultant provided council with the proposal, council approved that proposal, and then we moved forward with them as the consultant.
And with respect to that, the consultant was actually as it being vetted as a group that they knew of, as opposed to where Sustainable Warstown is not recommending a specific body. Going back to, we should, I think, look at the person, but also the money is important to me. Are we going to limit this to, let's say, $25,000 or $30,000? How much money are we going to put into the study especially since there's a $50,000 or $60,000 study that we already have had done in the town, which I don't think we have currently reviewed. I've never seen it, I've asked for it. I mean, isn't there a value in going back and making sure our process is good, is my thought. And I'm not gonna say anything else, I've said a lot.
Well, it seems to me that so much of the preliminary, looking into this has already been done by Sustainable Morristown, who certainly has more expertise on the matter than I think most of us up here do. I don't know how much more preliminary work we can really do at this point before we appoint someone to consult with. You mentioned several times, Greg, this could be a $9 million project, and it could be, but we're not spending $9 million today. We're simply trying, I don't think we can move forward and have any idea what the scope of this project is truly going to be until we have a consultant to help us go down that path. So I would want to move forward today and with the appointment.
So, you want to go forward with the appointment? Okay. And the appointment would be Nazer?
Would that be a resolution for the next meeting, or is it just,
Could I ask how much money then we're gonna appoint or spend on this? I was just wondering how much money we were gonna spend on this study. As I said, there's $68,000 of the study already, but how much money we're gonna spend on this study?
If council makes an appointment tonight, Greg, what I will do is have that appointee provide township with a proposal, a scope of work, and a not-to-exceed budget, which would be presented to council. Council will have to approve that at a future meeting.
Yeah, that's the first time, that's good.
Okay, does that help allay your fears? Okay, great. All right, so then we move forward with that. We vote?
We'll no vote, we're in a workshop, and they're not formally appointed tonight.
Right, so we're just, we're moving forward, direction, we're giving direction. Perfect, okay.
Before we get to Mr. Taylor, this is the way the list goes, Scott, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to stay here for a while.
Council's been talking recently about potential changes to the agenda format and different options. I did talk to Stacy earlier today. She had an idea that I thought was a very good one, so I don't want to steal her thunder, so she can take it away.
I just, after we were talking last meeting, and Greg was concerned about limiting people to talking, and we were all discussing about how we can make meetings more efficient, and moving them forward without impacting the work that we have to do with town. I thought maybe what we should do is move the meetings to 7 o'clock, and then have a 7 to 7:30 workshop, so that Scott, we can discuss, any of our workshop information, and then we can also have that also be where the public comes up and gives presentations and requests. And then that way, at 7:30, we move into our official action meeting. If there's things that need to be discussed further, they can be moved into the next workshop meeting, and we can even do more research on them. But I think it gives people a chance to talk about what they want to get done, any ideas they may have, but yet gives us a time frame to make that happen.
I like that idea. I know last week it was thrown out there. There's one people throwing me in the movie, not having the boards, which is so far from the truth. I didn't want to discuss it, but I think that we need to have people feel free to come up and have a voice. And if it's in the workshop section of it, I have no problem with that. I think that's a great idea. It's an informal workshop where we're just batting around with some direction and stuff.
Thank you. I thought it was a good idea. I don't know what.
It started at 7.
Well, I think, as I said, the objectives were to make sure that, and as we did 3 months into our being a council together, the objectives were so people would have a voice in the beginning. And certainly we would hear the voice at the beginning of the meeting. I'm here at 7 o'clock anyway.
I don't think it's too much more to get there half an hour earlier.
No, I think that's a good idea, especially, most presentations or, requests made at that time are not something we would be taking official action on anyway, so it's appropriate that would be the workshop portion of the meeting.
The only thing I would add is that there speaker.
Well, but we
Yeah,
have to have an ending time, because we'll have to have the official action meeting at 7:30 will start. We can't push that off. So there would be an ending time. My concern was, we were going back and forth with the 3-minute rule, and I hate that 3-minute rule. It's like, what do I sit here with? I sit there with gavel or
And the
and a
Congress,
timer, and then we're gonna have to,
in the
mom gonna
Congress,
put a timer up on the wall. And, it just doesn't make it conducive for people to actually come up and talk about what they'd like to talk about.
in the process illustration you just defined, we would not want to go and introduce public comment at 7:27. We would want to do it at 7:15.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it that I don't think, Scott's workshops are gonna be very, very long, and we usually get them done pretty fast.
He now knows that.
Now he's gonna make it longer.
Well, and just in a process question, maybe we would move back the idea of old business and new business, which is now in the workshop. If necessary, for longer subjects, we would put it in the meeting or hold those items to the meeting.
And I
That would be
think, right, and I
process.
think where we also have presentations and proclamations, we'd still be able to have Sustainable Morristown come and give their presentation in our formal
Yeah,
meeting.
in the
And
formal
we,
meeting.
so things like that, when they contact Scott and let them know that that's what they'd like to do, I think that's, appropriate.
I would agree with this as long as if we got into a subject that was longer and we held to the 7:15 for residents requesting presentations. If we held that if we were getting into a longer discussion, we keep with the 7:15, holding to our public comment idea and say, okay, we're going to discuss this as part of the meeting in the normal time we have done, which is the end, or close to the end, the new business and old business. So this would be 2 process items. I think that would be a value.
Well, also, if it's gonna be something that is sparking that much discussion, it's gonna end up being an agenda item at some point or another, so it would end up, on the agenda.
It'll end up on the agenda.
I
And it's,
agree
you know,
with that construct.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I'd like to see, and it's happened several times, you get, rebuttals going back and forth, and I think that needs to get.
But that's part of the process.
Oh, that is part of the process,
Part of the
but-
Robert's Rules process and the way the
Right.
meeting is run, and that's what we should discuss, I think.
All right, so,
Yeah, the only thing I would add, just to go along with what Greg said, is perhaps during the official action portion of the meeting, we have something built into the agenda, whether it's an old business, new business, or something that allows us to go back, if necessary, to a conversation that had to be cut short, because we're now 37 minutes into this workshop,
My
and we
point.
still have one topic to go. So.
Thank you.
well, and the one topic together would be really effective in a.
Well, that's true too.
Right? So, I mean, there's ways that we can get through that. Mr. Taylor would then come to the formal meeting instead of the workshop.
I'm sure Mr. Terrell would enjoy that.
I only need about an hour and a half of your time.
Okay, meeting adjourned.
The later the better.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll make the adjustments to the agenda appropriately, and then Patty, I guess you'll have to.
So can we do, you want to start this the next meeting? So then, I'm going to redo our upcoming meetings. August 4th will not be at 7:30, it will be at 7 o'clock, right here.
Or workshop will be 7 o'clock.
Workshop will be at 7 o'clock, official action will be 7:30.
Right, and at 7:15, we've all agreed that would,
Or thereabouts, I'm not gonna, I don't think it should be 7:15 cut.
or 7:13.
Yeah, we can be earlier, we can be a little bit later. Okay? We compromise on that? All right, there we go.
Okay, so now, since we built him up, and everyone's dying to know what Scott's here for, we'll get to the last topic we have on the workshop agenda. At the next council meeting, I plan on having a list of bond ordinances for council to vote on, based on all the capital projects that were discussed during the budget workshops in the spring. One of those bond ordinances will be a large bond ordinance in the sense that it'll contain multiple projects for recreation. Most of those projects are associated with, at least some of the projects are associated with specific sports, and the organizations that run those sports are plan to partner with us, which, we'll have something in writing from them, and if we don't, then council can table or vote no on the bond ordinance. The one project that sort of is a community recreation feature, I'll call it, like a tennis court, a basketball court, or a tot lot, is the Jeff Young hockey rink. It's been talked about before, members of the audience and the mayor himself have talked about the condition of that rink. As a result of the condition of the rink, it was removed last week. Just knowing that we were going to put something there and taking the rink out before an accident occurred at the rink because the condition had just gone downhill. Just for those that don't know, Scott Taylor is our park planner and landscape architect and works with Teresa Miller, our recreation director, on park capital projects. So if talking to members of the council, talking to them, I asked them to come to tonight's meeting to discuss different options, because the original plan was to not treat this rink as we would the rink at Wesley Bishop, which is the rinks that the local organization, Misha, the Youth Street and Roller Hockey Association, use for their program. And roughly how many kids are in Misha, Teresa?
This year it's climbing, it's about 800.
800 Morristown kids in that program. So it's a substantial Morristown program. But the Jeff Young hockey rink is too small for them to use. So it's like I said, more of a community feature for a playground. And as such, Teresa had proposed a plan to me, which was in the budget that council received earlier in the year for the capital budget, to not have the same level of walls for the rink. It was essentially a 12 or 18 inch high wooden board, and then high gauge chain link fence from there on up. And then was asked to see if there was anything, what the various options are from that to the highest level boards and anything in between. So with that said, I'm going to let Scott and Teresa discuss what ideas they've come up with and what options we have. I believe we might have something for the screens now.
Nope.
Can't get it to work. All right, well, at least council has the handout, and Scott, you're going to have to do the old-fashioned way.
No problem, I'm used to that. Thank you and good evening. As Mr. Crew indicated, we were brought in last week. There were some questions about the facility, and it was under demolition. Initially, in the budget that was presented, Teresa had included funding for a recreation level community rink enclosure, which is, Mr. Crew indicated, was chain link fencing with a low board. That is actually the first 2 pages of the exhibits that we provided to you are some photographs of similar courts. I've actually done a few courts through my career in this fashion. It's done with a very heavy gauge chain link fence that has a very narrow mesh to it to facilitate the play, so the ball can still be used. Corners are not squared. They are notched and angled to replicate the rounded corners, so on clears, you still get that element of play. What is also done is boards are then placed and they can be pressure treated 2-bys with ease tops for safety in a 12-inch or 15-inch high or even 18-inch high configuration. 90% of passes in street hockey, roller hockey, and line hockey are lower to the ground, and it facilitates that and also kicking and escapes themselves. So that is an appropriate level for recreation, pickup game level, non-league play. And the cost for a system like that, if you use a very high quality, thermally fused PVC chain link fencing, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $30,000. There's also there are a few cracks. The cracks don't look bad structurally. There is some horizontal separation, but there's no vertical separation. So I think a little bit of sealing and a little bit of TLC to that court may increase the long-term lifespan of that court. As you move up from that recreation level, there are a variety of systems. When you start to get into a dasher system, I should start by saying the existing court that's out there is about 60 by 120. For comparison, the courts out at Wesley Bishop are 75 by 175, which is more in line with what you would see at a college rank or competition level, ice or street roller hockey. So this is, as Mr. Crew indicated, this is a smaller recreation level size field. Due to site constraints, there really isn't much opportunity at all to increase the size of this. So this is kids in the neighborhood sort of pick up type recreation play. When you start to get into that next step, you start to get into what's known as the dasher system, which is what we have at Wesley Bishop. This is an industry, outdoor dasher boards have gone through, over the last 20 years, trial and error of a variety of framing materials and also board materials. There have been a lot of successes and a lot of failures. The boards themselves generally need to be replaced sometime between every 12 to 15 or 20 years. Some you get a little longer out of. There are a lot of materials that are plastic materials, rotationally molded plastics. They can be impacted by freeze thaw. When you start to get into the dasher systems, there is a little bit more expense involved with that. Because of the presence of the dasher, there's an expectation that it's a higher level of play. You're more likely to get checking, you're more likely to get more intense game and team play. So they need to be designed to be safe and sturdy and durable in that higher level of play. The price for a dasher system, for an outdoor municipal level dasher system, gets up into the $85,000 to $100,000 range. There are a few products less than that. The concern with those is if you're paying New Jersey prevailing wage to do a major construction project, the material costs of having to replace that in 10 or 15 years, you're usually better off using a little bit better quality product, doubling the lifespan for a slight increase in materials. Most recently, we've had some discussions today that there might be an opportunity to look at some alternate and perhaps even some fundraising or some volunteer efforts to assist with the construction. I think there may be an opportunity there to meet and discuss, because again, there is really a large range in the prices for that. Potentially look at some other alternatives.
I think it's great that we're going to be putting something back. My concern, and I've had a lot of people calling me over this, and Scott and I've had several conversations over the past few days, was that it would be a rink that was I guess, comparable to what they have now, or what they had. My concern with that is the safety, not just the safety, but the vandalism aspect of it. When it's a community rink like that, you have to worry about kids going in there and doing things they're not supposed to be done. Whereas that low dasher board really does help to alleviate that, because you can see what's going on when our police officers ride by. You know, they can see in. But I also understand that there's community support for having a little bit, I don't want to say better, because I don't know if it's better, but just a little bit different kind of rink. So I wouldn't mind looking into that, especially if you said there's other alternatives that we can look into to see how that's going. I know there's been several people who have approached me who said they would get a group together of volunteers to help out, to help maintain and move forward with this. So I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah, the concerns, and I think I've shared with pretty much everybody here, the concern I have is we have a lot of sport recreation facilities in town that are used by these organizations, and they are maintained by these organizations. And Teresa, if you could give an idea of the type of maintenance work that Misha puts into the rinks at Wesley Bishop. I know that they clear the snow. I know that they I guess, painted the walls and the surface. What else has Misha done to help maintain the two rinks at Wesley Bishop?
They've done, like, their storage rooms, they've rebuilt the storage rooms, they've painted, they do 50-50 with the town. We go out and resurface and repaint, it's usually a 50-50 deal. But they do an extraordinary amount of maintenance work.
Right, so my concern is, even if we had the construction covered by volunteers, by donations, whatever it may be, and we spent a lot of time at the last meeting discussing ongoing maintenance with township facilities. Granted, a hockey rink is not on the same level as a 37,000 square foot building, but the fact of the matter is, there's still an ongoing maintenance issue. The security issue, Teresa, I mean, do you
The
see
security
it?
issue would be much better on a fence, as Stacy said, you know, especially, the other thing that I know families like is when a child is playing softball, their other little child will go into the rink and they can see what's going on, like the tennis rink. Misha has said that they are not going to use the Jeff Young rink as league rink. They'll never use that, it's too small. They want everything contained in one facility, so all their equipment is in one facility. However, they will donate 2 brand new top-of-the-line hockey balls, which is worth about $1,800. But I walked that site again today, and as Scott said, it's cracked. It's really not that bad. And I think, again, with just a little bit of resurfacing and repainting, I think it would look beautiful.
But basically, just comes down to what kind of batter we're going to put out the flip.
Right.
What we want to really vet out. That's right.
Yeah, you know, I definitely, as you said, there are a lot of people in the neighborhood there who are very committed to seeing this or go back up. And, you know, I know we always have a concern, you know, volunteers, how long are they going to stay interested in the project? But in terms of, you know, the initial getting it started again, I know that it's there. You know, that rink really does get used a lot, and maybe not by, you know, our organized sports, but I can tell you that kids showed up the day it came down wanting to go play hockey. You know, it gets used every day by kids in the neighborhood, so I think there's really an interest in preserving that as a part of that park. As for what, you know, materials we use to do that, I think that we really owe it to the community to really carefully suss out all of our options. You know, we obviously want to do it in a cost-effective way, but also something that's going to last. Scott, I have a question. What is sort of like the life expectancy of the low board with chain link construction?
I actually did one in about 1994, 1995. That is still utilized today. Some of the chain link fence, the middle poles have not been maintained. They need to be tightened occasionally like anything, but that is still in good shape and still in good usable shape. So if it's done properly, it should have a lifespan of 15 to 25 years, similar to a good dasher system. Some of just to replace the plywood and fiberglass boards out at the Wesley Bishop rink, the one that was constructed first, was a price of approximately $35,000. So there are long-term costs associated with that replacement, like a lot of recreation playgrounds. Same thing, you've got that 15 to 25-year window, and there will be major equipment replacement costs.
I know that Misha has said they're not going to use that facility at all. They have 800 kids in their league. Is there any chance that they would want to use that as an overflow moving forward?
We asked that question when we met with them, and they said no.
Speak now or forever hold your peace, because, you know, I mean, it's, you know, I know they, you know, when they're in here, they said like a 24% increase, and,
Right,
you know,
well,
it's-
that's
it's
roller
really
and,
moving.
that's
a
roller
lot of games on
and,
two rings, I mean.
but that's roller and street. So
It's
it's,
a lot of-
so it's two different seasons, I know.
Yeah,
I mean, because it's not regulation size, they don't wanna,
yeah.
I think that's.
All right, well, I mean, I wanted to put it out there, that, you know, it's, you know, we're looking at going another way, and, you know, once we go that way, they're fixed, you know, it's.
They had to really want our other regs to be even bigger, ones in the each.
Well, I mean, it's, you know, you're positive that they don't want to, okay, well,
I wanted to, sorry,
that's it.
I wanted to ask Scott what the impact of construction of putting up the fence poles versus putting up batter board and the poles themselves and demolition and construction. What's the two values there?
One of the things we need to do is get out and get some survey information to see exactly what the TIFO is doing. For the fencing systems, you can go in, we would want to saw cut the existing to get a clean edge. There's a little bit of rattling at the edge, so we want to clean that out to the dimensions that we come up with. The fencing can be constructed like standard chain link fence that would have sonotube footing,
Right.
and then standard chain link fence construction with that board, and then restoration behind that. When you start to get into the dasher systems, it's the preferred way from the manufacturers is to have a concrete foundation or grade beam that goes around the entire outside. So you're saw cutting that oval back in, and then you are either doing footings with a monolithic slab, or you're doing one grade beam that would be 10 to 12 inches wide, 30 inches deep to get below the frost line, so you don't have heaving and sort of a dislocation of those boards, because you want to try to keep that as straight as possible. So it is, and that is part of the cost associated with it, it is a slightly more intensive process, again, because of the rigidity of the dasher system. There's more involved with that. That gets then bolted down to that concrete grade beam with fence posts that go through it, and then at the ends, there's chain link fencing up to a height of 10 or 12 feet, depending on the specifications, and sometimes on the side midlines as well.
And what would be the difference in level of play between the dasher board system and the proposed, did you say the fence was meshed, I think, if I remember correctly, and has a vinyl coat to it? What's the difference in level of play?
One is really a pickup and neighborhood recreation level. I told Deputy Mayor, growing up, you know, a couple decades and 100 pounds ago, I played in the South Jersey League all through high school, and then I actually played at Rutgers in an intramural league. We played outside, we played in converted tennis court fences, we played inside gymnasiums where there were benches and bleachers next to us. And it wasn't until I finished my career and actually played the pickup game in Medford, after I was out of college, before I actually played on the dasher board system. So this is something that street hockey's been played for 100 years, since people have been paving streets. The huge construction of tennis courts, when the NRPA, National Recreation and Park Association, came up with their tennis court standards that were population-based, everybody in the 70s built tennis courts. They built tons of tennis courts. They adjusted their numbers down because a lot of these courts sat through the 80s and 90s. Rollerblades came out, and everybody in the country said, we can use that empty tennis court. We'll just take the net down, skate around the poles, and put some nets in there. They remove the poles, you recoup. So there's been...
Michelle's agreeing with me.
Right. And much like a lot of other recreation trends, with the popularity and the advancement of plastics, the costs associated with skates and other equipment, and also with the rinks, towns started getting occasionally some dasher systems. So those other levels of play are still out there. There are still people building recreation pickup games. Some of them don't have any, it's just basketball hoops. They can put hockey goals in front of it with no boundary. We all played that way in gym class growing up. We played in the gym, there were cones, and you just skated around.
If I slap my goal against the fence and I slap it with dasher board or slap it with the fence, what's the difference?
In terms of the impact of the ball,
Right, the play, how is it effective?
well, the balls are actually designed, it's a special no bounce ball, so when it hits on a perpendicular fashion, it really creates a deadness to the play. That's, I think you're gonna see similarity between the.
So either one. Right, so there's no difference in the actual value of the play at that point. Thank you.
You will, I said, on a perpendicular. On passes and on wraparound shots, there is a higher level of play, and that's why leagues in the NHL and high school and college, they play hockey, ice hockey in particular, on full dasher systems, because that is the ideal league and competitive play.
So in the level of play, of the higher level of play, the dasher board system would be a value, but in the level of play of a pickup.
Recreation.
Forget it.
Thank you.
Well,
So I just saw her going.
Yeah, I have one last question. I'm sorry, where did you say the one that you did was in 1994? I haven't seen any that have like the 12 or 18-inch dashers, or not dashers, the boards.
The one we did actually had there was a 2x12. It was on the edge on Heil Avenue, next to Monsignor Lipinski School in Trenton. And that is on page 2 on the right-hand side.
Would the council object if I gave this to the 7 people in the back?
Here, Greg, you can go to the left side first.
Is that a 12-inch dasher, or
That is-
12-inch?
That is a 12-inch. And I apologize, that image was just, I went on Google Earth and dropped down to a street level view just to try to get a snapshot of what that looks like.
Now, here's to me, council's got, I guess, one of 3 choices here. Council could decide to go with a full dashboard system and bond for that. Council could decide to go with the chain link and bond for that. And I guess the third option at this point is we still introduce a full bond for all the recreation work at the next meeting, but not go forward with a plan if council wants to see what type of feedback we can get from the neighborhood, if there's buy-in. Because even if we have the buy-in, I still think the plan of whatever that buy-in would be should be evaluated by Scott and Teresa. But in theory, that buy-in would cover the cost. So introducing the overall recreation bond ordinance shouldn't be negatively impacted by that.
Yeah, I think going forward, we just do, but Teresa, you, in the bond ordinance that you have told Scott and Tom about would be this 12-inch board system with the chain link. I mean, it is.
That's what I
Okay, so
recommended in the budget.
we would budget something, we're putting something back up. I would think that we should go forward with that. And we have a couple weeks to, I know, Scott, you had gotten a phone call today about different things, other options that we can look at.
Yes.
And maybe vet those out, and at the next meeting, we'll know, what those options are gonna be, what they cost, and see if there is any public interest into getting that group together to help out with the maintenance of that
Right.
grant.
Well, and what I'm suggesting is even if we don't know everything, the council doesn't have enough information to make a decision at the next meeting, we still introduce the bond ordinance, because anything more than the chain link fence system, in theory, what I'm hearing is correct, and council correct me if I'm wrong, would be covered by some type of donation, volunteer effort. So we can still get the ball rolling, because the bond ordinance for the parks, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, Tom can correct me if I'm wrong on this, we don't want to do 5 different bond ordinances for recreation in a single year. We want to do one that encompasses everything. We do have projects at Wesley Bishop, which we're going for a grant for the hockey rink there. We have projects for softball and lacrosse that we have buy-ins from softball and lacrosse for. There is some money in that total for, to make sure that we have enough to finish all the drainage issues at Memorial, which, by the way, the short-term fix was completed a couple weeks ago.
Wait, I don't see Marcia. Where is
Marcia is happy,
There's no
happy
idea.
today, so.
She was the
So,
one that did.
Unfortunately, neither one of us have been out there during the heavy rain yet, but she thinks it's working, so.
Great.
But in any case, just to get that ball rolling, and this way, if council decide on what I call Plan A, we're already in the process of doing the bond, and if it's Plan B or Plan C, we can still move forward at the next meeting and change direction if council decides to.
I'm happy with that. I don't have to.
So we move forward with the plan as presented like that, but if we go forward.
We move forward with introducing the
There's
bond
more
ordinance.
money given to, we
Right.
would reduce the bond ordinance, we'll have a bond for, larger bond, but we'll incorporate the funds from whoever volunteers.
Right, so we move forward with introducing the bond ordinance. If it's a more elaborate project, but it's getting funding, that shouldn't impact the bond.
Makes sense to me.
Okay with that?
Yep.
All right, so that's good. We'll move forward with that.
65 minutes later, the workshop's over.
Yeah, but this wouldn't be part of
That was
it.
part of the regular. We do not have any presentations or proclamations.
Going back to the workshop, since our workshop is now new business and old business, I know we've been distracted a great deal with voting, et cetera, but I would ask that at some point we go back to what I asked for in regards to our engineers giving us a report on all of these ordinances that we have funded, their current status, and whether completion is expected at some point in maybe the next 2 or 3 meetings, so we know where we are on the delivery. I will say it's really wonderful to see on Second Street that the handicap ramps are in, which I asked for a long time, that could go, because I know people that need those handicap ramps, for instance.
And thanks for reminding me of that, Greg. I actually did get a report from Mr. Rudderman recently. I will forward to council.
Great.
I believe we have a meeting with R&B, our utility engineer coming up. I'll make sure that they are aware that we're looking for a full report as well.
Thank you, sorry to elongate.
No.
All right. Again, no presentations and proclamations, so we're going to move to residents' requests and presentations on items not listed on the agenda.
Scott and Teresa, you guys are welcome.
Not that you're welcome, you can.
You don't want to say here?
Do a little.
Yeah.
Monique Bay, 2019 Harry Drive. I want to see first that I did see, my husband and I saw the 2 plays in town, and we thought the cast in both instances did a formidable job on what are really a difficult task, really, and it involves many people. Mrs. Napolitano, you're quite an actress. That's good, so I think it's good to know that we have good theater in town. My husband and I were walking along the Strawbridge Lake today, and we noticed how beautiful the parkland is, along the park. That's beautiful. But the water really needs some cleaning up. And that's a very expensive proposition. Dredging is not inexpensive. I know it was done when we lived in Medford in the 70s. It was done at Birchwood Lakes. It's expensive. It doesn't last forever, the results, because it all depends what you do about erosion. And but I think that one of the things that could be done that would not cost probably anything, really, It involves the schools, both private and public, in doing some studies, you know, the chemistry and the life that is present there. So there's life. They were nice little butterflies flying about, and they were the kind of insects that breathe in water. We saw quite a number of them, you know, so that's good, but really it's excessively enriched, and you can really tell this by looking at the bottom, the amount of vegetation. So I think that this would be a good scientific project for for the schools.
We've hired a scientist to actually work on this.
You
2
have
months ago.
the public schools.
Not the public schools, no, working with the Morristown Environmental Advisory Committee and with STEM, we hired Princeton Hydro Engineering. And I know Mr. Garwood and Mr. Newcomer were out with them a couple weeks ago. They're doing extensive study on not only the lake itself, but going upstream. You know, so they're not just looking at what the effect is, they're looking at the cause.
And 14 people from STEM were there as well.
Sure, yeah, if
Filmed it.
you gentlemen want to add anything to that, because I think, because when you first said the lake, the water itself, I wasn't sure if you meant like garbage and debris and things like that, but you're talking about overgrowth of vegetation.
No, I'm talking about eutrophication, the amount of vegetation in the lake.
That was
Really,
That was addressed, a very long topic of being discussed. And there are a lot of choices we can make moving forward, and they are being looked at on how to, like the lily pads, for example, the spatagot, I do believe is what it's called. You know, that can be remediated, that can be pulled out of there, the algae can be taken care of, and the side, the bushes on the side can be, you know, taken care of
We
as well.
suggested the dredging.
it can be used, you know, we
Yeah.
use some of it
And
that
we
works
may not
nice.
need to dredge, I mean, it's, you know, you can only dredge so much out of a lake, and we did do it about 15 years ago.
Yes.
So, you know, you're only allowed to go down to a certain level, the original level of the lake, you can't go any deeper. So, you know, we may be able to get by, I'm not saying, you know, we can, but we may be able to get by with just doing some,
The only thing we don't have this time is Senator Lautenberg helping us get $1 million.
yeah, which is.
But we are looking, it's
Yes,
something
it's
that's
being
in the
looked at.
work, it's being worked on
It
as we
is.
speak.
Yes.
So you're working on
Yes,
it,
we are.
STEM is working on it. and
because
STEM
that's a resource.
Yeah,
STEM
absolutely.
suggested
It's
the
an asset.
engineer.
And if the lake becomes really just completely covered with weeds and then eventually with grass, then it's not going to be a lake
No,
anymore.
it's one of Morristown's, I think, best assets. And one of
It's an
take care of it.
asset.
Yeah,
And
it's-
Actually, Elizabeth
tremendous.
Endress, who is with us tonight, was one of the people who was there and is involved in STEM and is moving this forward, and was one of the people who suggested Princeton Hydro, as did Barbara Rich. So these are people who are well familiar with exactly what you're talking about. They suggested this engineer. The engineer held a seminar of how those people would help with exactly what you're talking about at the lake, which Bill and I attended. So things are really active in trying to move forward with this.
I remember actually when I was pregnant, in the early stages, I recruited a group of kids and worked on a cove with them, you know, and we did a great job of cleaning up a cove in Medford years and years ago. We're talking of the 70s here. So
Maybe we're not hearing what you're saying, Mrs. Pegg. Maybe we should address the STEM, that maybe they should involve the folks, the kids from the high school. Maybe that's what you're saying.
yes, but you know,
Okay,
both
well,
the private
We can talk about
and
that, sure, yes, ma'am.
you know, and I think it should be done.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, any other residents requests for presentation? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to ordinances on second reading. Mr. Manager, could you read by title, please?
Yes, we have one for this evening. It's 4-2014, conveying fee simple title of municipal property to Orleans at Main Street LLC for the installation of a monument sign for the residential development located on the adjoining lots.
Okay, let's open this for public hearing. Seeing none, is there a motion and a second to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Any abstentions or nays?
No.
Okay, motion carries. So council, any discussion? Or can I have a motion to adopt adopt ordinance number 4-2013 on second reading.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Mr. Newcomer?
Yes.
Mr. Garwood?
Yes.
Ms. Napolitano?
Yes.
Mayor Jordan?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jordan?
Okay, we have no ordinances on first reading, so move to consent agenda resolutions.
First is 148-2014, awarding a contract in the amount of $18,642.15 to Oakwood Uniforms for the purchase and delivery of the police department uniforms. Next is 151-2014, approving the 2013 annual report of audit. Next is 152-2014, appointing Gina Ziegel to the Appearance Committee. Next is 153-2014, authorizing contract change order number 10 for the Town Hall Library project in the amount of $15,979.20. Next is 154-2014, authorizing a one-year extension of a contract in the amount of $16,716.50 with Aramac Uniform Services for rental uniforms for the Department of Public Works. Next is 155-2014, authorizing the cancellation of certain water and sewer charges. And finally, 156-2014 is awarding a contract in the amount of $561,000 to Level 1 Construction for ultraviolet disinfection replacement at the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, now I'd like to open the floor for public comment. Okay, seeing none. Council, any comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I just have one question on 154. Scott, what do the guys at Public Works rent for uniforms? It brings us to $16,716.50.
It's shirts, coats, gloves, work gloves, basically boots, so whatever you see them wear while they're working.
Okay. Yeah.
So in regards to the water ordinance, which my eyes are not running, which it is, I have to pull it up here. 155, 114. One of the misreads was $5,500. A $5,500 misread seems to be an awful lot. Understood that it was a business at the time. But do we have a way for the water facility to notify people when there is a loss of water in a major user like that, as the water is still lost, which kind of takes up the business of the misread and that kind of thing? Is there any way in which we go and notify them, gee, you're pumping out water, it's to the tune of $5,000? I don't know how many gallons, maybe, at a time.
It wasn't a leak. It was actually a misread.
It was a misread.
Which is our guys.
Well, still, okay, so then the converse is, if misread over a month, a misread over 2 months, a misread over 3 months, it just seems to be an awful lot of money, that amount, even if it was a misread. How do you misread that much?
That's unfortunately the issues occur with the manual system. And what happens is someone goes out there, they have a gun that they point at the meter, then they take the number right into a book, and bring back that book to the office, and the person takes it, types it into the computer. It's in, we talked about it years ago. Most of these are caught before they go out, but because it's been entered into the system, then it still has to be canceled because there's a paper trail. Sometimes they're not, but everybody's meters read quarterly. And when someone in the office sees a problem with it, they send somebody back out to go verify it. But it still has to be a resolution. Sometimes most of them are caught in the office before they ever go out. The rare ones are caught actually by person where they bring it to our attention, now we go out and we take a look at it. But it's human error occurs when you have people writing it and, transferring, somebody else has to read that again. As opposed to a keystroke error when someone transposes a number or something while typing it in.
You don't want to vote on them at all?
There's really, I don't see any problem with tabling. this
Table,
to next
let's
year.
just table to next meeting.
It's not like we need to pay a vendor or a professional or.
I'd love to do that.
Let's, Patty, you have.
Yeah.
Move the table to the next
Do
meeting
you,
if
you
necessary.
have, did you get them?
I get discounted
Just that you
tonight,
got, okay, good, I just want to make sure you got it.
but right, and I'm happy to table it. I'd really rather do it.
We'll just table it to the next meeting. And moving on to approval of expenditures. Any comment or motion to approve? No. Any,
We do need to pay the bills.
moving on to approval of expenditures. So I need a comment or a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
You guys were shy on that one. Patty?
I was trying to do that.
Mr. Whitmore?
Yes.
Mr. Garwood?
Yes.
Ms. Napolitano?
Yes.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor Jordan?
Yes. Okay, moving to comments from the public. Okay?
Good evening, Edwin Begg, 209 Perry Drive. I want to talk about money in a minute. First of all, on efficiency, the objective of that part of the session was, hey, things could be moved forward a lot faster. I'd just like you to know that at the start of the meeting, I brought a can of paint with me. I went over in the corner and painted a little panel, and then I timed it, and the paint dried before you guys are finished talking about Jeff Young.
Is that water or oil?
I don't know, it's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
65 minutes.
So,
I submit that, you know, you guys can do probably a little better and maybe change your procedure for a relatively small amount of money, $25,000 or whatever it was, that either Mr. Garwood, through his athlete buddies, makes a recommendation and then direct the council, or same route, and then Mr. Carew, and then township manager makes a recommendation, yes or no, and it's done in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, then we get in trouble for doing it that way too. We'll have
Yeah.
somebody come yelling
Anyway,
at us.
that's,
We try, we'll try.
the big thing I'm here to talk about is the solar energy. And if I were an investor, no offense, you guys would be the last group I would think of investing my money in. Looking globally, this might have been a good idea 2 or 3 years ago, it probably is not now. For example, looking globally, Ukraine, you know, what's happened there. The solution for Germany and Western Europe, you know, how come those guys aren't following Obama and doing bad things against Vladimir? And the reason is they count on Russia through Ukraine for a lot of oil and gas. Their solution is that, well, tomorrow we're going to put up a solar panel. Moving on to China, several months ago, one of the big Chinese companies in the solar cell production business went out of business, went bankrupt. That should tell you something. Venture capitalists out in, say, the Silicon Valley, who really work at warp speed, in contrast to the session tonight, would have made a decision months ago. There is no particular solar energy venture capitalist activity out there, nor in Wall Street. There's no hot stock company that makes solar panels. There is no, and this has probably been gone 2, 3, 4 years now, there's no, to my knowledge, any subsidy from the feds to develop solar energy. So none of the external signals in this country, in the world, are saying, hey, let's go solar panel. So I know last meeting there was a discussion, presentation, thorough presentation on the subject, and now we're following through. And looking at and thinking about two remarks tonight, Mrs. Jordan, hey, I want to move things along, I agree. And Mr. Garwood, hey, I don't want to waste money, I also agree. Instead of trying to make a decision as to which vendor, prospective vendor to go with and spend money, how about a no-cost issuance of an RFP, request for proposal, incorporating some of the thoughts expressed at the last meeting, and also by what the council and I submit should have or consider a working meeting of their own to come up with, together with Mr. Carew, a collection and ideas of, if you're going to issue an RFP, question is for what? And for example, basically the township wants to see if they can make money. So one of the things in the RFP would obviously be that any prospective vendor that you want to consider is, what's your experience, what's your track record? Where, have there been investments made by, as a result of your recommendations to whomever your customer was at the time? So, if you guys, council, Mr. Carew, should decide, what it is you want, and if you can't really decide, and you give me the impression, maybe it's erroneous tonight, is that you haven't really collectively decided what it is you want to do, then I submit, particularly when I hear one number, $9 million, all I can do is roll my eyes. So if you could get together, do it, RFP. If you can't decide what it is you want, then move on to some other subject.
Mr. Begg, I provided this on July 16th of last year report to council, which talks about the current value, technique in this country, and style of solar, which has greatly improved. I'll be happy to give you a copy, which will, I think, give you some credence for us going forward. There are many townships, particularly in New Jersey, who are benefiting more from not only the technology, but advances in housing finance and the benefits of the town. I'll be happy to give you a copy of this.
Don't misunderstand me, I'm in agreement that it should be considered, but my observation in the world is, hey, there aren't a whole lot of people out there who are really hopping on the bandwagon.
There are.
Well, but you can't, it's not me you have to convince, it's you convincing the other 4 members of council.
I'm happy to say I think they're willing to go ahead.
You have my opinion for what it's worth. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Begg. Okay, any other comments by the audience? And move on to closing comments by council. Mr. Newcomer.
I have in my hand, and I want to share this with council, a cyclical maintenance program for Pomona Hall in Camden, New Jersey, which I only often look at for how you would approach basic care facilities. I'm not going to use the keywords computerized maintenance management system again. But this was a forerunner of how you approach that. So in your thoughts as you go forward, and particularly with Mr. Garwood's opening comments that we should look to go and either use fiscally the funds that come from us, to us from taxes, or try to reduce them. I think this would be a good study, as well as the aforementioned systems. Yeah, I think
Thank you.
I work off a computerized good night system for someone to say good night, what you do. Good night.
Mr. Polidoro.
One thing I add, probably should have even said this before, I was happy to see the ultraviolet disinfection replacement go in today. When I last visited that facility, I was impressed upon me how important it was for us to update that system. So it's been really a difference in their operation there. And yeah, thanks for coming tonight.
Okay. I don't believe we have to go into closed session, so thank you everybody for coming out. Enjoy the nice summer night, and we will see you on the 4th of August. On the 7th. 7 o'clock. All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.